let's come to chapter 2 of the story, about the hero Perseus and his confrontation with Medusa. Far from the storm-racked shores of Sarpedon, where the wind wailed its mournful dirges, on the sun-drenched island of Seriphos, a different kind of poison was at work, subtle and insidious. Here lived Perseus, favored son of Zeus and the mortal princess Danae, cast out to sea in a wooden chest by a fearful grandfather who sought to defy a prophecy. They had been rescued by the humble fisherman Dictys, a man whose kindness shone like a beacon in a harsh world. Perseus grew into a young man of remarkable strength and spirit, his divine parentage evident in his sharp intellect, his quick wit, and the subtle, untamed fire that burned in his eyes. He knew nothing of the Gorgon's profound tragedy. His world was one of sun, sea, and a fierce, unyielding, protective love for his mother. This very love, pure and unwavering, was the lever by which he would be moved. Dictys' brother, the island's ruler, King Polydex, was a man whose appetites were as vast as his authority, and his greedy gaze had fallen upon the still beautiful Danae. He desired her, a prize to be taken, but the proud, watchful Perseus stood directly in his way, a lion cub guarding his beloved mother. Polydex, a man of cunning rather than courage, a viper in king's robes, devised a scheme, intricate and cruel, to remove the formidable obstacle. He announced a grand banquet, inviting all the nobles of the island, a gathering of pomp and pretense. The declared reason was to gather contributions for the dowry of Hippodamia, a princess of a neighboring land, a flimsy veil for his true intent. As wine flowed freely and songs were sung, their merriment a stark contrast to the darkness festering in the king's heart. Polydex moved from guest to guest, accepting their lavish gifts of horses. When he came to Perseus, he knew the youth had no horses, no wealth to offer, a fact that filled him with cruel satisfaction. "And you, Perseus?" the king said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity, laced with mocking challenge, loud enough for the whole unsuspecting court to hear. "What noble gift do you bring to honor this auspicious occasion?" Perseus, young and proud, felt the sting of his poverty, a public humiliation. He stood tall, his jaw set, refusing to cower. "I have no horses, my king, but ask of me anything else, and I shall bring it. I would even fetch the head of the Gorgon Medusa if you commanded it." He spoke the words rashly, impulsively, a boast born of youthful pride and a desperate desire to prove his worth, to silence the king's contempt. He knew of Medusa only as a name and a dark legend, a monster from a sailor's terrifying tale, a figment of distant nightmare. He did not see the triumphant, predatory glint that flashed in Polydex's eyes the moment the trap snapped shut. A sudden, ominous hush fell over the entire hall. The king seized the opportunity, his voice booming with feigned gravity, masking his true delight. "A noble pledge, quest truly worthy of a son of Zeus. We shall hold you to it, young Perseus. Forget the horses, they are but paltry baubles. Your gift to this grand celebration shall be nothing less than the Gorgon's head. Do not return to this court, do not dare show your face until you bear it in your hands." The trap was sprung, irreversible and absolute. Perseus was bound by his own public oath, by his fierce pride. He could not refuse without suffering unbearable shame, a stain upon his honor that would brand him forever. He saw the flicker of dawning fear in his mother's eyes, and the cruel, knowing smile on Polydex's lips, and he understood, too late, the true nature of the game. He was not embarking on a noble quest. He was being sent on a suicide mission, a pawn in a lecherous king's twisted scheme. But his pride, the very fire of Zeus within him, would not let him back down. He would go, he would face the monster. He would return a hero and protect his mother. He was a good man, thrust into a terrible, inescapable path, forged into a weapon by the insidious lies of a tyrant. Chapter the 14th. The gifts of the gods. Perseus left Seriphos under the cloak of deepest darkness, his heart a cold stone of anger, shame, and unbreakable resolve. He was a demigod, yes, but he was also a boy, alone, and facing a task that seemed utterly impossible. He stood on the shore, the waves lapping at his feet like a mournful farewell, and he prayed. Not to the king who had condemned him, but to the divine Father he had never known, a desperate plea into the vast, indifferent heavens. His prayer was answered, not with a thunderbolt, but with a series of ethereal blessings. The gods of Olympus, who saw the intricate threads of destiny far more clearly than any mortal, knew this quest was more than the whim of a petty king. It was a nexus of fate, a knot in the grand tapestry that needed to be cut, a balance that required restoration. And Perseus, though unwitting, was their chosen blade, their instrument of justice. The first to appear was Hermes, the nimble messenger god, his winged sandals skimming the waves with impossible grace. His face alight with a wry, knowing smile that held ancient secrets. A heavy burden for so young a hero, he said, his voice like the rustling of leaves in a sacred grove. But a son of Zeus does not walk alone into the jaws of doom. From his own feet Hermes unbound his golden sandals, their tiny wings fluttering with impatient energy, yearning for flight. These will grant you the speed of the wind itself, Perseus. The path you must walk is long, and the dangers many, unseen. He also placed into Perseus's hand a gleaming sickle, its blade forged of adamantine, a metal so impossibly hard it could cut through anything, even a Gorgon's scaly hide. A tool for a grim harvest, indeed, Hermes noted, his smile fading slightly, replaced by a somber gravity. As Hermes vanished, dissolving into the dawn mist, the air grew still and unnaturally cold, a shadow seeming to fall over the waning moon. A figure emerged from the deepening gloom, cloaked and silent, his presence a palpable aura of ancient sorrow and immense power. It was Hades, lord of the underworld. He rarely interfered in the affairs of the living, preferring the solemn dominion of the dead. But the Gorgon was an abomination, a perversion of life and death, a creature so unnatural that even he found it offensive. He offered Perseus a simple leather cap, dark as the deepest night. "The cap of darkness," Hades said, his voice a whisper of falling dust, of forgotten graves. "Wear it, and you will be unseen by the eyes of gods and monsters alike. You will be a shadow among shadows." Finally, a silver light, pure and piercing, descended from the heavens, illuminating the desolate shore. Athena stood before him, not as a gentle mentor, but in her full war regalia, her gleaming helmet casting sharp lines, her gray eyes sharp, focused, and utterly devoid of warmth. She looked at Perseus not with affection, but with the cold, praising gaze of a general inspecting a soldier for battle readiness. In her hands, she carried a shield of polished bronze, so bright it mirrored the stars in the nascent dawn, and a strange leather satchel, the Pegasus, which seemed to absorb the light around it, a pocket of absolute shadow. "The creature you hunt is my creation," she said, her voice devoid of emotion, hard as granite. "A mistake that must be unmade, a stain that must be cleansed. Her gaze is death itself. You must not meet it. Use this shield. Look only upon her reflection, and you will be safe from her power, for her curse cannot touch an image." She handed him the shield, its surface cool and perfectly smooth. "When the deed is done, her head will retain its power, its lethal gaze undiminished. It is a weapon too dangerous for the open air, a curse too potent to be exposed. Place it in this satchel, and its gaze will be contained, its power imprisoned." Perseus now stood armed with the impossible tools of the gods. He felt their power thrumming through him, a terrifying and exhilarating sensation, like lightning coursing through his veins. He was no longer just a boy on a fool's errand. He was an instrument of divine will, a champion of Olympus, chosen for a grim task. He did not question Athena's cold motives or wonder at the full hidden story behind her mistake. He saw only the path to his goal: to slay the monster, save his mother from the clutches of the wicked king, and claim his hard-won destiny. Chapter the 15th. The Path of Whispers and Stone. The gifts of the gods were magnificent tools, but they were not a map. To find the Gorgon's desolate lair, Perseus first had to seek out the Grey sisters, ancient hags who lived in a cave at the very edge of the world, in a land of perpetual twilight where the sun never truly rose or set. They were sisters to the Gorgons, ancient as the rocks themselves, and they alone knew the treacherous way to the cursed island of Sarpedon. With his winged sandals, Perseus flew for what seemed like an eternity, crossing vast, churning seas and desolate continents, until he reached the land of the Cimmerians, shrouded in eternal gloom where the sun never shone. He found their cave, a foul-smelling fissure in a barren mountainside, exhaling an air of ancient decay. Hiding himself completely with the cap of darkness, rendering him utterly invisible, he watched them. They were withered and ancient beyond imagining, with the forms of old women, but the gray, leathery skin of corpses, their limbs gnarled like ancient roots. They had but one eye and one tooth between the three of them, which they passed from one to another in a gruesome, slow ritual. Waiting for the opportune moment, his heart pounding a silent rhythm as one sister passed the precious eye to the next. Perseus darted forward with the speed of the wind and snatched it from the very air between their grasping fingers. A chorus of enraged, panicked shrieks filled the cave, piercing the gloom. "Our eye, who stole our eye, you unseen thief? Give it back!" Perseus removed the cap, revealing himself, his presence suddenly materializing in their sightless world. "I have your eye," he said, his voice firm, echoing with authority. "And you will have it back when you tell me the precise path to the lair of your sister, Medusa, and the horrors that guard it." Cursing and spitting, their ancient voices raspy with fury, but utterly helpless without their shared sight, the Gree reluctantly relented. They gave him precise, chilling directions, their voices like the grinding of stones, describing the cursed island of Sarpedon, and the unspeakable horrors that awaited him there, dwelling within the deep, dark caves. Perseus tossed the eye back to them, watching it plop into a waiting, withered hand, and then, without a backward glance or a moment of hesitation, he flew west, driven by destiny. He saw the island first as a black speck on a wind-dark, perpetually stormy sea, a jagged tooth against the horizon. As he drew closer, he felt the oppressive aura of the place, a palpable despair that clung to the very air, chilling him to the bone. He landed silently on a rocky beach, the black sand cold and lifeless beneath his winged sandals. Before him lay the stone garden. The sight chilled him to the very core of his being. It was a battlefield frozen in time, a grotesque testament to death. Warriors in bronze armor stood with swords half-drawn, their faces locked in eternal agony. Archers were petrified with arrows knocked on their bowstrings, forever aiming at an unseen foe. A minstrel still clutched his lyre, his mouth open in a silent song of terror. Their stone eyes stared out at the sea with an eternal, unseeing horror. Perseus walked among them, his heart heavy with a profound understanding. These were not trophies. They were dire warnings, frozen screams. He felt a surge of pity for these brave, foolish men, and a hardening of his resolve. Whatever this creature was, whatever its origin, its reign of death had to end. He gripped Athena's polished shield tighter, took a deep, steady breath, and turned towards the dark, gaping maw of the cave, the source of such suffering. Chapter 16. The Gorgon's Dream. In the deepest, darkest chamber of the labyrinthine cave, Medusa slept. Her sleep was not restful, not peaceful. It was a shallow, troubled state, a brief, tormented respite from the ceaseless hissing of her serpentine hair and the crushing, unbearable weight of her profound solitude. In this half-sleep, she dreamed. She did not dream of being a monster. She dreamed of gold. She dreamed of the vibrant sun on her face, its warmth seeping into her skin like a forgotten blessing. She dreamed of the intoxicating scent of olive blossoms and the melodious sound of hymns echoing in a sacred marble hall. She dreamed of her own hands, pale and slender, tending a gentle, unwavering flame, a symbol of purity. These fragmented memories of her past were both a fleeting comfort and an agonizing torture, relentless reminder of a life so completely lost it might as well have belonged to someone else, a beautiful ghost. In recent days, a new, unsettling element had entered her dreams. A premonition, a cold, creeping feeling of an approaching end, a finality she could not escape. She had felt the arrival of every other hero as a hot, arrogant intrusion, a clumsy stumble into her lair. This was different. This felt like a cold, quiet thread being pulled taut in the grand tapestry of fate, a destiny she could not escape, woven by unseen hands. It was the undeniable feeling of the gods, their ancient, Terrible attention once again focused on her, their forgotten, cursed plaything. She awoke with a sudden start, her monstrous heart pounding, the serpents on her head agitated, hissing and coiling, sensing the unseen presence. She did not know why, but a profound sense of finality washed over her, a wave of resignation. The crushing loneliness that had been her constant companion for so long was tinged with a strange new emotion, a weary acceptance. She had long ago stopped weeping, stopped raging against her cruel fate. All that was left was a deep, pervasive, weary sorrow. She had not asked for this monstrous life, and she did not wish for this inevitable death. But she felt its approach as surely as she felt the cold stone beneath her scaled body. She sat in the absolute darkness, listening to the incessant hissing of her hair and the heavy, monstrous beating of her own heart, and waited. Chapter the 17th. The Clash in the Cave. Perseus entered the cave, his senses on high alert, every fiber of his being tuned to the lurking danger. He wore the cap of darkness, rendering him utterly invisible, a phantom in the gloom. He moved with the silence of a whisper on his winged sandals, light as a feather. He held the polished shield before him, its gleaming surface his only window into this world of death, a mirror to his grim purpose. The cave was a maze of winding tunnels, slick with moisture and smelling of decay, of lingering fear and the metallic temps of old blood. The only light was the faint, eerie glow that seemed to emanate from the phosphorescent moss clinging to the damp walls, casting grotesque shadows. In the clear reflection of his shield, Perseus saw the treacherous path ahead, every detail unnervingly sharp. He moved deeper, his heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drum against his ribs, a warrior's beat. He heard it before he saw it, a low, constant hissing, like 1,000 venomous whispers in a dead language, a sound that curdled the blood. Then, in the reflection of the shield, he saw her. The creature was more horrific than any sailor's tale had described, more terrifying than his darkest nightmares. A towering form, part woman, part reptile, with skin like diseased bark, mottled and ancient, and the hair a living, writhing nest of black vipers, their tiny, cruel eyes glowing malevolently green in the oppressive gloom. He could see the reflection of her face, a mask of profound tragedy and silent terror, with great, sorrowful tusks framing a mouth set in a permanent, grim snarl. But it was the eyes he was warned of, and in the reflection, they burned with a sickly, phosphorescent yellow light, a beacon of pure, annihilating power. A gaze that promised oblivion. Medusa sensed him. She could not see him, but she felt the disturbance in the air, the cold. Focused intent that was so different from the hot-blooded rage and arrogant bluster of the others who had come seeking glory. She rose to her full, monstrous height, the serpents on her head hissing furiously. Sensing the invisible, encroaching threat, she turned, her lethal gaze sweeping the cavern, a silent, deadly searchlight, desperately seeking the intruder. Ah! Perseus held his breath, his knuckles white on the shield's handle, his body taut with tension. He watched her reflection, his mind a whirlwind of primal fear and unshakable determination. This was the monster. This was the evil he was sent to destroy, the source of the stone garden's horrors. He saw no maiden, no priestess, no victim of divine cruelty. He saw only the creature from the terrifying stories, the killer of the men frozen outside. Athena's guidance was a cold, clear voice in his mind, echoing her divine command. Strike now, end it, fulfill your purpose. He moved a silent shadow in the oppressive darkness, his winged sandals barely disturbing the air. He circled around her, always keeping his eyes locked on the bronze reflection, his gaze unwavering. She was confused, turning this way and that, knowing something was there, but unable to locate it, her monstrous eyes sweeping empty air. Her frustration grew, and she let out a guttural hiss of pure rage that echoed through the damp tunnels, a sound of frustrated power. This was his moment. While she was turned away, her back reflected clearly in the shield. He surged forward, a living arrow loosed into the darkness. Chapter 18. The Severed Head and the Crimson Birth. He raised the adamantine sickle, its divine blade gleaming even in the dim reflection. Forged by a god, It sliced through the air with a soundless, fatal grace, an instrument of absolute finality. He did not hesitate, not for a single heartbeat. He brought it down in a single, clean arc, precise and swift. There was a sickening, wet crunch, a sound that would forever haunt his nightmares. For a moment, there was a stunned, unnatural silence in the cave. The constant, maddening hissing of the serpents stopped abruptly. The monstrous body stood, headless, for a single, agonizing heartbeat before it crumpled to the cavern floor. A discarded husk, its reign of terror ended. The curse was broken. The mortal life of Medusa, tragically intertwined with the Gorgon's existence, was over. Perseus, panting, still looking only at the reflection in the polished shield, saw the head fall. But what happened next defied all reason, all natural law. From the severed neck, where black, unnatural blood now gushed like a river from a dark spring, to beings sprang forth into existence. Fully formed, born of death and violation, first came Pegasus, a magnificent winged horse, his coat the color of new-fallen snow, gleaming with an ethereal light. He gave a triumphant whinny that was the polar opposite of Medusa's scream of anguish, a sound of pure, untamed freedom, of soaring spirit. He spread his great, powerful wings, and with a single mighty beat that scattered the dust of the cavern, he soared upwards and out of the cave mouth, a living star, ascending into the gray, dawning sky. Carrying with him the spirit of the profound beauty Medusa had lost, purified in her final moment. Then came Chrysor, a giant of a man, tall and powerful, born clad in gleaming golden armor, and wielding a golden sword. He was not a monster, but a warrior, noble and strong, a figure of daunting might. He was the embodiment of the raw strength Medusa had gained through her suffering, the power that had been twisted into a curse, but was now in her son, born anew and pure. He gave Perseus a single, unreadable look, a gaze of ancient understanding, before striding out of the cave and into the nascent light of the world, his own destiny awaiting him. Perseus stared, momentarily astounded by this miraculous, horrific birth. Athena's voice, sharp and urgent, echoed in his mind. The head, do not look directly. He averted his eyes, fumbling for the Pegasus, the magical satchel. He grabbed the head by its writhing, dying snake's sensation so foul it almost made him reach hand. Without a single glance at its horrific features, shoved it deep into the magical satchel. The moment it was sealed inside, the oppressive aura in the cave lifted, the sickening, petrifying power contained at last. His grim quest was complete. He turned and fled the cave of death, leaving the strange, miraculous birth and the tragic broken body behind him. A dark chapter concluded. Chapter 19. The Legacy of the Gorgon. Perseus returned to the world a hero, the monster slayer. He rescued the fair princess Andromeda from the ravenous sea monster Cetus, turning the beast to stone with a brief, controlled glimpse of the head's contained power. He arrived in Seriphos to find his beloved mother hiding from the relentless, tyrannical King Polydex, who still sought to force himself upon her. He strode directly into the king's court, where Polydex and his fawning sycophants mocked him, their sneers echoing with disbelief, refusing to believe that the boy, his pawn, had actually succeeded. "I have brought you the gift you requested, my king," Perseus said, his voice cold and hard as stone, resonating with a chilling finality. He reached into the Pegasus, pulling the drawstring. "Look away, all who are my friends, all who are innocent." He pulled out the head of Medusa. For one final, terrible time, her dead eyes opened, and her curse flared, a last, devastating act. Polydex and his entire court were frozen in their sneering arrogance, transformed into an eternal tableau of their own corruption. Their greed and cruelty immortalized in stone. His mother safe, his quest fulfilled, Perseus had one last solemn duty. He traveled to Athens and presented the head to Athena, the goddess who had guided his hand. The goddess accepted it with a thin, triumphant smile, a chilling victory. She took the monstrous visage, the face of the priestess she had so cruelly punished, and affixed it to the very center of her own shield, the mighty Aegis, the terror-inducing symbol of her power. And so the final bitter irony was sealed. Medusa, the victim, the maiden defiled, became a symbol of her tormentor's power. Her suffering repurposed for divine glory. Her face, twisted in eternal pain and rage, became the Gorgonian, an emblem of protection, a terrifying device to ward off evil, to strike fear into her enemies. Her terror was weaponized. Her suffering was made a shield. The maiden who had loved the sun was now an icon of darkness, her memory forever bound to the goddess who had destroyed her. Her personal tragedy was complete, yet her story, a tale of beauty, betrayal, and a terrible, enduring power, would be whispered for all time. Epilogue. The echo in the stone, the story of a life, does not truly end with its final breath. It echoes, rippling outwards, shaping the world in ways seen and unseen, subtle and profound. It was with Medusa. Perseus, the acclaimed hero, returned the divine gifts, his quest truly concluded. The winged sandals to Hermes, the cap of darkness to Hades, the shield and sickle to Athena. He became a great king, ruling Tyrans and Mycenae with his beloved queen, Andromeda, whom he rescued. He was celebrated in song and story, his name synonymous with courage and divine favor. Yet the victory carried a shadow in his heart. In quiet moments, when the world was still, he would remember the chilling stillness of the stone garden, the sorrowful hiss in the dark cave, and the tragic, monstrous face he had only ever seen in reflection. He had slain a monster, the world told him, hailed him, but he who had been there would forever wonder what exactly he had killed. He had been a weapon forged in lies, and though he had one, the memory of the Gorgon's dream, of a life of sunlight brutally extinguished, was a quiet. Pegasus, the child of ethereal beauty born from crimson blood, became a legend in his own right. He soared to the very heights of Olympus, becoming the loyal bearer of Zeus's thunderbolts, a swift and magnificent steed. He was a symbol of inspiration, his hoof striking Mount Helicon to create the Hippocrene spring, from which all poets and artists drank, drawing forth divine creativity. In this way, the spirit of Medusa's lost beauty and her profound gift for song lived on, inspiring the very mortals who would tell her monstrous tale, a subtle, profound irony woven into the very fabric of myth. Chrysaor of the golden sword, the child of strength born of violation and bloodshed, vanished into the wide world of men, forging his own path. His journey was his own, a quiet testament to the immense resilience that had been at Medusa Escora's strength that had been perverted by her curse, but was in her son, born anew and pure, unblemished, and Athena, the goddess of wisdom, carried the mighty aegis into every battle. The Gorgonian Medusa's face, at its terrifying center. The face of Medusa, frozen in its moment of ultimate agony, became her most terrifying weapon, a symbol of her implacable power and unyielding justice. It was a stark warning to all who would defy her. This is what becomes of those who displease Athena, who bring impurity to my sacred spaces. She had turned her perceived shame into a potent tool of fear, her victim into a permanent sigil of her victory. It was the ultimate act of a cold, strategic god ensuring that her version of the story, the tale of the monster, the villain, was the one that would be emblazoned on the shields of warriors and imprinted upon the minds of men for centuries to come. But stories, like ancient rivers, can change their course over time, slowly carving new paths. The bards sang of Perseus, the monster slayer, and the sculptors carved the hideous Gorgon. Yet, in the quiet corners of the world, other whispers began, faint at first, then growing stronger. Philosophers and poets, looking deeper than the surface, began to question. They saw not just a monster, but a maiden, pure and devoted, cruelly wronged. They saw not just a curse, but a profound injustice. They saw the hand of jealous gods and the tragic fate of a mortal caught in their divine, uncaring games. The echo of Medusa's scream, the one that had shaken the Parthenon to its foundations, never truly faded. It lingered in the cold stone of her garden, in the mournful memory of the sea, and in the hearts of those who understood that the most terrifying monsters are not always the ones with serpents in their hair. Sometimes they are the ones who sit on golden thrones, who demand unwavering worship, and who, in their infinite wisdom, cannot find a single drop of mercy. Medusa's life was a tragedy, her death a tool for heroes and gods. But her story, in its final, enduring echo, became a quiet rebellion, timeless question about the nature of justice, the true price of beauty, and the enduring power of a woman wronged.